All right, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to PPA 535. I want to make sure we are recording, and we are. It's nice seeing you all again. I know there are some folks who aren't going to be with us this morning, but I thought this morning we'll just go over the course and the course requirements and keep it a really short morning for you and hopefully get you out of here no later than 10:30. I thought we'd talk about the course and then leave a few minutes at the end that we can talk about where you were at in the program, since you are very quickly progressing toward the end of the program, and talk about how we're going to wrap everything up so that you can be all set and be all done and ready to graduate in spring 2023. But again, it's good seeing everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and that you are progressing along on your case studies, and we'll get to the discussion of the case studies in just a second. But let me go ahead and just introduce you to the course. We'll go over the syllabus. The site, Beachboard site's been available for a while now, so I hope you've had a chance to go on and take a look at the syllabus. So we'll just highlight a few of the important parts of the course as we go through this morning. Again, we're staying with Beachboard since you guys are so close to the end. You only have one class left after this. The other cohorts are going to be transitioning over to Canvas because the entire university is moving to Canvas, and the whole university will be on Canvas no later than summer of 2023. You all will be done before then, so I thought we'll just stick with Beachboard for this course, and then your next course, the grants course with Dr. Matthews, and just kind of finish it out in that consistent way with Beachboard. But this is PPA 535, Intergovernmental Relations. This is a course that's very common to most MPA programs. Some MPA programs have it as an elective course, like our stateside program does. A lot of programs across the country have now made this a core required course as part of their MPA programs. It's really become that important for the field of public administration. This course is intergovernmental relations. Back in the day when I was in graduate school and I took this course, we called it federalism. And there is a difference between constitutional federalism and intergovernmental relations that we will touch upon this morning. But this is intergovernmental relations, where you look at the relationship between federal, state, and local government. So whenever we're looking at all three levels of government, it's intergovernmental relations. Now, I do apologize that you didn't have your normal 2-week break between the last class and this class. It was just one of those scheduling things that in order to get this class finished before the university's winter break, we had to start right away and had to start today. Otherwise, it would have then bled into the university break. We would then have to take a week off and then come back in January to finish 1 week of the course. It just really didn't make any sense to do that. So I'll give you a short morning this morning to try and make up for you only having 1 week instead of your normal 2-week vacation between courses. But let me go through the syllabus and just talk about some of the things we're going to be doing and why we're going to do them and when we're going to do them and how we're going to do them. And then take any questions you have about the course. And then, like I said, at the end, we'll then talk about how we're going to wrap up the program and any last minute things we need to do to make sure that you graduate in the spring. So, you know our schedule. It's the same schedule as we've always had throughout the entire cohort. So we're going to have our synchronous sessions on Mondays, beginning this coming Monday. You know, we do our Beachboard discussions as well as the asynchronous component. So all that remains the same. As I said, this 535 course is an elective course in the stateside program. We've included it in the DL program now since, ever since I've been affiliated with the program. So all the way back to 2001. So this really is one of those integral courses for the entire program. This course is very much of a graduate seminar. And I know that the courses you've had in the program so far, some of them have been more lecture-based. Some of them have been more discussion-based. This truly is a graduate seminar, which means that I'm going to talk to you this morning. Then in our first Monday session, I'll do a little bit of lecturing in the first half of class. And from then on, it's a graduate seminar, which means we're going to be covering articles in intergovernmental relations and discussing those articles. So you're going to have very little of a lecture component. What I will do, though, is as we have our discussions of each article for each of our sessions, at the end of that discussion, I will then interject and bring some perspectives in and kind of put that article within the context of the intergovernmental relations literature. But it won't be the typical type of lecture like we may have had in organization theory. So it is a different type of course. Um, Course objectives, what are we trying to do in this course? By the conclusion of the course, you'll be able to describe the concept and implications of constitutional federalism. When we say constitutional federalism, we are talking about federalism as embodied in the US Constitution, meaning the delineation of roles and responsibilities and powers between two levels of government, between the national government and state governments. Local governments have no legal standing in the US Constitution. They are not mentioned in the US Constitution. The only powers that local governments have are powers that come to them from their state governments. And so in the state constitution or through state legislation or rules and regulations. But states provide those protections for local governments. Those protections are not found in the Constitution. So when we're talking federal and state relationships, we're talking about constitutional federalism. It's only when we bring in local governments into the equation that we transition from constitutional federalism to the term intergovernmental relations. So we'll understand constitutional federalism. We'll then also develop an understanding of intergovernmental relations, the relationship between all three levels of government, and try and find that nexus between intergovernmental relations and public policy and administration. So kind of show you why this course is in a public administration program. We will demonstrate understanding of the importance of fiscal intergovernmental relations. We'll have one entire week that will be focused solely on fiscal federalism. We'll talk about different types of grants. We'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of those grants and some examples of how the federal government has used grants to get the compliance of state governments and how state governments use grants to get the compliance of local governments. We will also demonstrate an understanding of the nexus between the judiciary and politics of intergovernmental relations. We'll make a pretty big deal about how we define intergovernmental relations in this country and whether we define it as a judicial term or whether we define it as a political term. If we define federalism as a judicial term, as a constitutional term, that means that state governments have some protection afforded to them from the Constitution. So if they feel that Congress is impeding upon their freedom, those state governments can then seek a redress for their grievances in the judicial system, if it's considered to be a constitutional type of issue. If, however, we consider it to be a political issue, then states must seek a redress for their grievances through the political process, meaning that they have to lobby, just like any individual or any interest group, they would have to go and lobby Congress for redress of their grievances. And we'll talk about the Supreme Court and how at some points in time, the Supreme Court has determined that federalism is very much of a judicial constitutional issue. At other points in time, they've defined it as being more of a political issue. And again, the implications for both of those definitions. You will be composing well-written, insightful, critical analyses of scholarly literature. As you'll see as we go through the syllabus, everyone will select 2 articles and will write article critiques on those 2 articles. And then you'll also effectively lead a classroom discussion. So you'll select an article and then lead one of our classroom discussions on that article. The textbook for the course is the O'Toole textbook. Oops, sorry about that. With the O'Toole textbook, you can use any version that you would like, any edition that you would like. Just make sure that the articles are in that edition that you are using, because there are certain articles we're going to be reading. You're going to have to make sure that you have access to those through the O'Toole textbook. In addition to the O'Toole textbook, which is really a compilation of articles on intergovernmental relations, I've also provided for you some articles on our Beachboard site, and so you'll be reading those articles as well. Then another good resource for you is the primary journal in federalism, which is called Publius. It's Publius, the Journal of Federalism. Publius, and it's called Publius because that's how Hamilton, Jay, and Madison signed the Federalist Papers. They signed them as Publius, and so hence the journal is called Publius. But Publius, the Journal of Federalism, is published, ironically, I guess, by Oxford University in England, but it's all about American federalism. And it is kind of that granddaddy of them all when it comes to federalism journals. So one of the important things about Publius is that every year, Publius will publish an annual review of American federalism. And that usually comes out in January. I provided the last few years of that annual review on our Beach Board site. Those are some of the articles you can choose from for your critiques, as well as to lead your classroom discussion. But then that annual review, the authors will take a series of issues, contemporary issues for that year, and talk about their implications for federalism. For many years, my former dissertation chair, was the editor of that annual review. But Publius is your best place to go for any articles on the issue of federalism and intergovernmental relations. I've published in Publius before. I've been a reviewer for Publius for about 20 years. It really is that top tier journal in the study of federalism. Then another resource for you obviously will be the Federalist Papers. And we have a few Federalist Papers assigned in this class. I didn't obviously assign all 85 plus of them, but we have a few of them that are assigned. The Federalist Papers, a great place to go if you want to understand the thought process of the framers when it comes to the issue of federalism and the Constitution. And so if you have a copy of the Federalist Papers, that's great. If you don't, I have a link on the Beach Board site that will take you to electronic versions of the Federalist Papers, and we'll be referring to those Federalist Papers throughout the course, especially in the first 2 weeks of the course. The Federalist Papers, written by Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, were written to try and convince the anti-federalists and the citizens of New York to support the federal arrangement in the new Constitution. And they really were very much written as a sales pitch to try and convince people to ratify the Constitution. Very early on, after the Constitution was adopted at the Constitutional Convention, we had several states that ratified it very quickly. And the requirement was you had to have 9 out of 13 states to ratify the Constitution before the Constitution went into legal effect. We had those 10 states actually who ratified it very quickly. The problem was that the state of New York did not ratify it. And so the framers knew they needed the state of New York to ratify it, or else the Constitution wouldn't be of any effect, because New York really was the linchpin for commerce among the colonies. And so Hamilton, Madison, and Jay wrote the Federalist Papers as a sales pitch to convince the citizens of New York that this new Constitution was nothing to fear, and this new Constitution was something that needed to be ratified. The majority, or more, of the Federalist Papers were written by Hamilton than Madison or Jay. Jay actually only wrote about 5 of the Federalist Papers. Then he fell ill and wasn't able to finish them. So Hamilton ended up writing over 50. Madison ended up writing about 27 or 28 of them. And then again, Jay made a very small contribution. But those Federalist Papers are very important for our understanding of the frame of mind and the thinking of the framers in establishing the Constitution. And then finally, another source of reading, if you're interested, is if you're new to the issue of federalism, you haven't had an American government course in quite some time, every American government textbook that's worth its salt will have at least one chapter on federalism. And so you can just pick up any basic American government textbook, take a look at that chapter on federalism, and that'll be a nice little refresher and a nice little primer into our system of American federalism. So those are the readings for the course. Again, the primary reading is O'Toole, and then the articles that I provide for you on our Beach Board site. So what are the course requirements? Again, as always, we're a 6-week course, so we have limited amount of time in order to be able to do assignments. And so I keep that in mind as I assign things to you and assign readings to you. So we have 4 primary components that will make up the course grade. There are 2 article critiques. There is a classroom discussion leader assignment, and then there are graded Beach Board discussion board posts. So in terms of the article critiques, everyone will complete 2 article critiques, article critique of 2 different articles. The purpose of the article critique is to allow you to engage in a critical analysis of the articles that are provided in the O'Toole text and provided on our Beach Board site. The critiques are brief. They should be parsimonious. Sometimes they're as short as 3 pages. Sometimes they're 5. Sometimes they're 7. I think anywhere in that range of 3 to 7 pages tends to be pretty typical for these critiques. You know me, I'm very much focused on quality over quantity. And so I'm really interested in you being able to be parsimonious and to provide a good, concise analysis of these articles. Each of the article critiques will consist of 3 different parts. The first part is the part that I'm not all that interested in. It is a brief description of the article. You have read the article. I've read these articles hundreds of times, and so we are both familiar with the article. So a very brief description of what the article is about. Then the second part is really what I'm interested in, the main body. In the second part of the critique, I want you to provide a critical analysis of the author's main points and arguments. Now, sometimes that's difficult to do. You look at this article and you say, well, this is something that was published in Publius. It went through a rigorous peer review type of process. Who am I to critique this argument? Well, you should critique the argument. We should critique all arguments that we read in articles. And so you think about things such as, are there any major points that the author left out of their argument? Are there some things that you think the author may have misconstrued or misunderstood? And so I really do want you to critically analyze the argument by the author in that second part of the critique. And then the third part of the critique, you're going to find that nexus between the article and federalism and public administration. So what does this article mean for our study of federalism and public administration? Are there any practical aspects of the article that would be beneficial to you and or your organization in the everyday course of doing the public's business? And so try and find that nexus between the article and public administration, federalism. Why is the article important to how we do public administration or how we study federalism? So you've got those 2 article critiques. You can select any articles from the O'Toole textbook, any of the articles provided to you on Beachboard to use as the subject for those 2 article critiques. You don't have to tell me what articles you're going to be critiquing. You can just go ahead and prepare the critiques. There's no set due date for the critiques because the critiques will need to be turned in before we discuss the articles in class. So I've provided for you under the content area of the website a spreadsheet for our discussion leader sign up, which will list all the articles and then the dates when we're going to be discussing those articles. So make sure you turn in your article critique before we discuss the article in class, because I want to see what you think in this article critique. I don't want the article critique to reflect the discussion that we have in class. I really want to see your original thought process and your original analysis of that article. So we've got those 2 article critiques. Again, they're due before we discuss the article in class. Then everyone is required to lead a classroom discussion of an article of your choice. Now, to save yourself a little bit of time, you can certainly choose the same article to lead a discussion on that you are writing your critique on. And I would certainly recommend that. That'll save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache just to use the same article for your classroom discussion that you're using for one of your critiques. In the classroom discussion, what you'll be doing is you'll be leading and facilitating a discussion. So it's not a presentation. A lot of people like to use a PowerPoint slides, a PowerPoint presentation to kind of guide the discussion, and that's great, but it's not a presentation. It is facilitation of a discussion. So you will be evaluated on your ability to engage your colleagues in a discussion. And that's how I'm going to be evaluating this discussion leader assignment. The discussion leader assignment, usually these discussions take about half an hour or so, depending upon the article. Some articles are very in-depth, they're very nuanced, and there are a lot of layers to the articles. So it's really easy to lead a 30-minute discussion. Some of the articles are much more descriptive and straightforward. There's one by George Brake that looks at intergovernmental grants, and it literally just kind of describes what types of grants there are. That one may be a little bit more difficult to get a half-hour discussion out of, but most of the time these discussions are about half an hour in length. Again, what I have put together is this spreadsheet. What I would ask that you do is, as soon as you can, take a look at that spreadsheet, take a look at the articles. Identify your top 3 choices for articles that you would like to lead a discussion on, and send me an email with your top 3 choices. I will then assign the articles for the discussion assignment based upon a first come, first served basis. And so that's why I'm asking for your top 3 choices, because maybe your first choice, someone got to it first. So at least I have some fallback options. So I can usually assure that you will definitely get one of your top 3 choices. If for some reason all 3 of your choices are selected by someone else, I will respond to your email and say, those 3 are gone. Here are the remaining articles. You'll have to pick from these remaining articles. So it certainly behooves you to get the email to me as quickly as possible so that you can have a broader choice of articles for your classroom discussion. Now, I'll talk a little bit later on about some helpful tips and tricks for leading classroom discussions. But that will be another assignment that will be in the course. And then finally, you'll have your beach board postings as you do in all of your courses. We have a total of 6 beach board posts for this course. The first one is an ungraded post. The first one is on your expectations, what you hope to get out of this course, what you hope to take away from the course. That's just kind of an assessment tool for me. So that first one won't be graded, but then beach boards 2 through 6 will be graded. And what I'm looking for with those beach board essays is I'm looking for a concise, parsimonious response to my prompt. Usually you can do it in 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then a response to at least 2 of your classmates. And so I'm going to break up the grading on those beach board posts, 10 points for your response to my initial prompt, and then 5 points for each of your responses to classmates. So that initial response, again, usually 2 to 3 paragraphs. A response to a classmate, you can certainly do with 1 paragraph to each classmate. So you got 5 of those. Those are going to be due on Sunday by midnight. That will then allow me to review them on Monday. And if there's any information I need to bring into class, I can have the time to bring that into class by Monday evening. So 2 article critiques, each of those worth 100 points. Discussion leader assignment worth 100 points. And then 5 graded beach board posts at 20 points apiece. Again, 10 points for your initial post, 5 points for your responses to 2 colleagues. All adds up to a total of 400 points. We use your basic 90, 80, 70, 60 type of split in the way in which we apportion grades. And then you also know from our 660 course that then I have that 1 percentage point flexibility rule that if you turn everything in on time and you participate in our discussions, that if you come in 1% below a grade, I will then give you a boost up to that higher letter grade. So those are the assignments. Again, I'll talk about some more details of each of those assignments a little bit later on in the syllabus. So our course outline, again, today we're just going to talk about the course, so we should be able to be done within the next hour. Then on Monday, we will start off with our background and foundations, and we'll really go back to the Constitution and talk about what the Constitution says about federalism. So in the first half of class on Monday, I'll present some information to you about the Articles of Confederation, some of the flaws associated with the Articles of Confederation, our first Constitution, and then some of the ways in which we rectified those flaws with the Constitution. We'll talk about the balance of power between federal, state, and local governments, and some of the functions that are the domain of the federal government, what's the domain of the state government, what's the domain typically of local governments. Then we'll take a break, and then the second half of class, we'll go through the Constitution. We'll pull the Constitution apart and kind of deconstruct it and get into the component elements of the Constitution and what those component elements mean for our study of federalism. So for your readings for Monday, please look over the Constitution, which I provided a link for you on our beach board site. Take a look at the Articles of Confederation. And again, there's a link on the beach board site to the articles, so take a look at that as well. I don't think we'll get to Federalist Papers 39 and 10. I have them listed actually as readings here, but on our spreadsheet, I have them listed for the 14th. In case anyone wants to lead a discussion on either of those Federalist Papers, you'll have until the 14th to get that discussion ready to go, because I think it's kind of a quick turnaround between now and Monday. So I'll handle all the discussion on Monday of the Constitution. And then you'll have articles you can start to select from beginning on the 14th. Your first posting is, again, your expectations post. And so your expectations of what you hope to get out of the course. Then on module 2, on the 14th, we'll continue our discussion of background and foundations, and we'll really get into those Federalist Papers. The ones we'll focus on are Federalist Papers 39 and Federalist Paper 10. If you haven't read those before, Federalist 39 is my favorite Federalist paper. It's where Madison deconstructs the Constitution to make an argument about the Constitution being both federal as well as national in nature. That both has a strong national government, but it also retains power to state governments. And again, he wrote that to convince New Yorkers to support the Constitution. And then Federalist number 10 is where he talks about factions. And he talks about what we need to do to control the effects of factions in what he referred to as a compound republic. And then in addition to that, then you also have an article by Morton Brodson's The Federal System, one by Deal Wright, The Models of National, State, and Local Relationships, and one by Martha Durthick, The Paradox of the Middle Tier. So those are our readings for November 14th. Then you'll have your second discussion board posting done due the following Sunday. Then in module 3 on the 21st, I hope all my dates are correct, we'll get into the political aspects of federalism. And we'll talk about how federalism is sometimes viewed as a political phenomenon. You'll have the article on governments acting as interest groups and lobbying Congress. You'll have an article on trends and issues in how states cooperate with each other. Article by Durthick, again, we've got a couple by Durthick in this class, ways of how the federal government can achieve its objectives, and then an article beyond preemption, and then your third beach board posting. Then in week 4, we will get into my favorite topic, which is fiscal federalism. We have several articles on grants, different types of grants, the use of grants, why we ended up getting certain types of grants in our federal system, why we tend to have categorical grants as opposed to broader types of grants. Then in our next week after that, we will get into a discussion of the administrative aspects of federalism. We'll talk primarily about mandates, different types of mandates, the advantages of having funded, at least partially funded mandates, and why oftentimes parent governments do not fund the mandates they pass down to subnational governments. And then in our final week, we will get into contemporary and future issues for intergovernmental relations. We'll look at things like homeland security. We'll look at marijuana policy. We will look at the future of intergovernmental relations and the future of the study of intergovernmental relations. And then on that last Saturday, December 17th, we'll use that session as an if necessary session. So if we get through all of our articles and we wrap everything up before then, we won't have a need to meet on the 17th. However, if we still have some articles to discuss, then we'll go ahead and meet on that last Saturday and finish up those final discussions. Again, you've got 6 beach board essays. Only 5 of them will be graded. The first one's an assessment one. So that first assessment one is due on the 11th, then one due on the 20th, on the 27th, on the 4th, the 11th, and then the 17th. So they're all due on Sundays with the exception of that final one, because our course officially ends on Saturday, the 17th. That's when your 6th and final beach board essay will be due. Let me talk a little bit more in detail about the assignments themselves and make sure we're all on the same page with the assignments, and then I'll open up for questions, and then we can move on to talking about finishing up the program. So these article critiques, again, you're going to be turning in 2 article critiques. You'll be selecting 2 articles either from the O'Toole textbook or from what I provide you in Beachboard, and writing critiques on those articles. As we said before, there are 3 sections to each one of these article critiques. So what I'm asking you to do is just give me a title page, and then section 1, which is the description of the article. What are the author's arguments? What are the main points the author is making? Then the second section, which is your critical analysis of that article. How valid is the author's argument? Were there any major considerations that the author omitted in writing the article? And then the third section, the nexus, the connection between the article and intergovernmental relations and public administration. Are there any specific lessons this article teaches us for public administration? Are there any aspects of your job or organization that could be aided or assisted by the theories and the arguments presented in the article. So the way in which I'm going to grade it, each of those sections will be worth 30 points. There'll then be a 10-point quality of writing component. I am asking that you incorporate some outside research to support your analysis. So 2 or 3 outside sources from peer-reviewed journals such as Publius or PAR. Include 2 or 3 of those to, again, support your analysis of the author's argument. So 30 points for each of those sections, and then a 10-point quality of writing component for a total of 100 points for each of those article critiques. It is again important to reemphasize that those critiques are due before we discuss the articles in class. So make sure you get those turned in before we discuss the articles in class. So those are those 2 article critique assignments. Again, you don't have to tell me which articles you're going to critique. That's up to you, because we can have multiple people critiquing the same article, because you're just turning the critique into me. So we don't have to have you sign up for those. But we will need you to sign up then for your discussion leader assignment, because we can only have one person leading a discussion of one specific article. So in this classroom discussion leader assignment, again, it's not a presentation. It's you facilitating, leading a discussion on that article that you have chosen. Those article discussions tend to be about 30 minutes or so. Some are a little bit longer, some are a little bit shorter. And again, you will be graded based upon your ability to lead and facilitate that discussion, to engage your colleagues in that discussion. In order to do a good classroom discussion, you need to, number one, be familiar with the article. This is something you're leading a discussion on, so you should be the most familiar with the article of anyone else in the class. You should prepare your questions in advance that you're going to be asking the class to facilitate the discussion. So have those written out, have those prepared in advance, and prepare more questions than you think you will need. Whenever we lead discussions, sometimes we may have a list of 5 questions we're going to use as prompts. If you burn through those 5 questions in the first 10 minutes, there's not a whole lot left to get you through the rest of the discussion. So prepare more questions than you think you will need for that half-hour discussion. Be flexible with follow-up questions, because you may ask a question and then the discussion may go down a different avenue. So be prepared to follow the discussion down that avenue. Be prepared to ask follow-up questions, kind of keep the discussion going. And the 5th tip is one that I think is really important, and that's to give time for your colleagues to answer your question before jumping in and answering the question for them. You've written these questions out in advance, so you're very familiar with the questions, but your colleagues are hearing the questions for the first time. So it may take them some time to process the questions and understand what you are asking of them. So when you ask a question, sometimes it can be very uncomfortable if there's silence. You ask the question, no one's answering, no one's raising their hand, there's nothing going on in text chat. It can get to be very uncomfortable very quickly. But try and fight against the urge to jump in and answer the question. Think about maybe rephrasing the question. Ask the question a little bit different way, because by asking it a different way, it may make more sense to folks than the first way you asked it. So ask it a different way, maybe clarify some terms, and give people a chance to think about the question and formulate an answer before you answer the question for them. Again, I do recommend you use PowerPoint slides or whatever types of slides you like to use, just to kind of organize your discussion a little bit. You don't have to. I'm not requiring that you use them, but most people do, just because it does give them that kind of that touchstone of organization they can use throughout the course of their discussion. But what I'm really going to be grading the discussion on is your ability to facilitate discussion and get people to participate. It's usually not difficult to get folks to participate. You guys have been in a cohort together for quite some time now, so you know each other really well. You're very supportive of each other. There is kind of that quid pro quo type of situation that emerges where people participate in other people's discussions, so those folks will then just participate in their discussion. So we usually don't have much trouble at all getting this discussion going on these articles. I will then jump in at the end of the discussion and I will add some context. And if there are any points in the article that I think need to be emphasized, I'll emphasize those. Don't feel that just because I'm jumping in at the end that there is anything wrong with your discussion. There's not. It's just sometimes I bring in some additional literature to, again, try and provide a context for the discussion itself. These discussions are, half an hour, as I said, a little bit less, a little bit more, depending upon the type of article that you are using. And again, it's really important, think about this as soon as you can. As soon as we're done today, think about what article you would like to lead your discussion on. Send me an email with your top 3 choices, and I can start making these assignments as early as we can, so we can get everybody signed up and we know who is doing what in terms of their discussion leader assignment. As I mentioned, for your beach board posts, you'll get 10 points for your initial response to my prompt, usually 2 to 3 paragraphs, and then you'll get 5 points for each of your responses to colleagues. And so a total of 20 points. There are 5 graded discussion board posts, so a grand total of 100 points for those discussion board posts. Then everything else on the syllabus is just your boilerplate information. You can read through that on your own. I highly doubt we'll have any major changes to the syllabus because it's a 6-week course, so we are in and out very, very quickly. But that's essentially the course itself. Like I said, the Beachboard site is set up, and so you can go in there and you can take a look at all the resources I have. They're all under content. The slides that I'll be using for Monday's session are under content as well. Under additional documents, I have the Constitution, I have the Articles of Confederation, I have some more recent Supreme Court cases dealing with the issues of federalism, and I also have a link on there for what's called the Anti-Federalist Papers. In this class, we look at the Federalist Papers. We're not going to look at the Anti-Federalist Papers, but I think it's important for you to understand that there is such a thing as the Anti-Federalist Papers. So we had the Federalists like Hamilton and Madison and Jay writing in support of the new Constitution and the new national government. But then we had some anti-federalists who wrote opposite papers to kind of a counterbalance to the arguments made in the Federalist Papers. So people like Robert Yates and George Clinton, Bryan, they wrote under pseudonyms as well in the Anti-Federalist Papers. They wrote as Cato, and they wrote as Brutus, and as the Federal Farmer. And they wrote their own articles arguing against the Constitution and against the Bill of Rights, kind of as that counterbalance. Now, as we all know, to the victor go the spoils. So the Federalists won. So we cover the Federalist Papers in classes. The Anti-Federalists lost. And so typically we don't cover their work. But I provided a link there just in case you're interested, so you can see that there is a countervailing perspective at the time that the Federalist Papers were written called the Anti-Federalist Papers. So that link is up there for you as well. Then all the additional articles that you can choose from for your article critiques and for your discussion leader assignment other than what's in the O'Toole textbook, those are all provided up there for you as well. You can go through and take a look at all the discussion prompts. What I've tried to do is have discussion prompts that cover all the different topics we cover in the course. So you've got one kind of on your basics of federalism, you've got one on the politics of federalism, you've got one on the fiscal aspects of federalism and grants, you've got one on the administrative aspects of bargaining and negotiation in federalism, and then you've got one on some more contemporary issues such as homeland security and domestic terrorism. You've got a posting on that as well. So I'll stop talking for a minute. That is the course. Those are the course requirements. Are there any questions about the course or the course requirements? I think it's all pretty straightforward. So as you digest this, and as you go through the syllabus, if you have any questions, feel free to email them to me. Again, your number one job right now is to read the Articles of Confederation, the Constitution by Monday, and then to send me an email with a list of the top 3 articles that you would like to lead a discussion on, so I can start making those discussion leader assignments in our spreadsheet. As I make those assignments, y'all respond to your email. And so if you say, here are my top 3, I'll tell you which one you got. I'll respond to you so you know immediately which article you got as your discussion. And then I'll also add it to the spreadsheet. And as I add names on the spreadsheet, I'll keep updating the spreadsheet and adding new versions of it along the way. Okay. Okay, so that's the course. We know that you are very far along in the program now, and we know that you have one course left in the program after this. So once you finish up this course, then you have your winter break. And then at the beginning of January, I think it's January 7th, you start up with your final course, which is the 540 Grants Administration course with Dr. Matthews. You've had Dr. Matthews before in the program, so you're very familiar with her. She will be your instructor for that course. That course will then wrap up in February, and then when that course is done, you are finished with all of your coursework for the program. So what will then be left for you to do is you'll need to finish up your case studies for 697. We've reopened the 697 Beach Board site, so it is open through May 1st, 2023. So you'll have you've got it available for you to then go ahead and submit your cases. I know 2 or 3 people have already submitted all 5 cases, and so they're all done with those. They've gotten grades for those. Some folks haven't turned in any cases yet, which is okay. I mean, you still have the RP, so it's not going to hurt your grade point average or anything, but you should be working along and trying to get those cases done. The very last day to turn in cases for 697 will be April 15th. That's the very last drop dead date, is April 15th, in order for us to get you graduated for spring 2023. So no, April 15th sounds like it's pretty far away, but you'll have to have all 5 of them done by then in order to graduate on time. Once you get all 5 of your cases submitted, as you know, what we will do is we'll review those. I grade some of those, Dr. Butts grades some of those, depending upon which case it is. Once all 5 of your cases are graded, we will then submit a grade change for you to change your RP grade to whatever the average is of those 5 cases that you submitted. And we'll take care of that as quickly as we can after you've submitted those cases. When your 5 cases are submitted, then the next thing you'll do is to complete your final skills self-assessment. And so if you remember back in 500, you did your initial skills self-assessment. Now, once your 5 cases are done 697, you will do your final skills self-assessment. A copy of that is provided to you in the Beach Board site. All you will need to do is basically redo the initial skills self-assessment. And so it kind of gives us that bookend assessment of your skills as you enter the program versus your skills as you are departing the program. So you'll do your final skills self-assessment, and then you'll be ready to put your portfolio together. Just as a reminder, that portfolio consists of 3 different parts. First part of the portfolio, the initial skills self-assessment you did in PPA 500, and the final skills self-assessment that you're doing here after your cases are done in 697. The second part of the portfolio will be those pre- and post-instructional assignments from budgeting, HR, board theory, policy, and research methods. And if you're not sure what was a pre- and post-instructional assignment for any of those courses, you can reach out to your instructor and clarify which they're using as pre- and post-instructional. For example, in our 660 organization theory course, we had identified the Beach Board posts as the pre-instructional, and then the organizational analysis paper you turn in at the end of the course as the post-instructional. But every course has different pre- and post-instructional assignments. You don't have to get any approvals on those. You can just submit them into the part 2 of the portfolio in the same manner as you would submit them in class, so you don't have to make any revisions or do anything to those. But part 2 will be those pre- and post-instructional assignments. Then part 3 will be the 5 case studies that you completed as part of 697. Those are the 3 parts of the portfolio. Again, you will submit those through OneDrive. Just share them with me on OneDrive. I'll then go through and make sure everything is there. Everything is there. I'll sign off on your portfolio, and then you'll be done. And then everything will be finished, and you'll have all the obstacles cleared for your graduation then in May. Everyone is advanced to candidacy. You all should have also applied to graduate. You got that email back in September to apply to graduate. So hopefully you've applied to graduate. If anyone has not applied to graduate yet, just go to the Enrollment Services website and you can apply directly on the Enrollment Services website. There is a late fee that they'll charge you of like $15 or something like that. But you can still apply to graduate if you haven't done so yet. I think just about everyone's already applied to graduate. Since you've applied to graduate, then what the university will do is Enrollment Services sometime later on the spring semester, They will run a grad check, and they'll go through and make sure that you completed all the courses that were listed on your advancement to candidacy form. If there are any discrepancies between your advancement form and the courses that you completed, they will contact us in the department and we will fix any of those discrepancies. But then you will be cleared to graduate. And then when you're cleared to graduate, you'll then be ready to graduate in May. The commencement, usually what they've been doing over the past few years is they have a university commencement at Angel Stadium. And then here in the department, we do our own commencement ceremony, either the same day or sometimes the next day. You're welcome to go to both of those, the university as well as the departmental commencement ceremony. Last year's commencement ceremony, we had another really good turnout. We were able to do it in person as opposed to the Zoom commencement ceremonies we had done the past couple of years. I think we had maybe about 60 or 70 students in attendance. So it'll be for both stateside students as well as DL-MPA students. We do it all in the same ceremony. Your degree will then post in May. It usually takes 2 or 3 weeks after your degree posts for you to then receive it, and then you will be all done and you will be graduates of the Beach MPA program. So that's where we're at. That's how we're going to finish up the rest of your time in the program. Do you have any programmatic questions at all for me since you got me here in front of you this morning? You guys are quiet this morning.
I have a logistical question about, you brought up the beach board postings as the pre-instructional assignment for, is it 660?
Yes.
Do we just take our beach board postings and put them like in a PDF, or what's the format for that?
Yeah, that's fine. You just put them in a PDF or put them in a Word file, however you want to do it. That's fine because you'll be submitting electronically. So Word or PDF is good.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure. And again, for any of your other courses, if you're not sure what was the pre and the post instructional time, because I know some instructors aren't as clear as perhaps they should be about what's the pre and the post instructional, reach out to those instructors and they should be able to clarify it. If you're not able to get clarification from an instructor on what's pre and post, what should be included in part 2, let me know. And then I can always intervene and contact that instructor and certainly get an answer for you. But everyone's a little bit different in terms of what they use as their pre and their post instructional assignment. Now, fortunately for elective courses, you don't have to worry about that. There are no pre or post instructional assignments for any of the electives, only for those core courses. Crystal, go ahead.
Hi, Professor. Nice to see you again. I was just curious. So on the syllabus, it had said November 7th was the Federalist Papers 39 and 10. But on the spreadsheet, it says November 14th. We're going with the 14th date, right?
Yes, we are, because I wanted to give extra time in case anyone wants to lead a discussion on either of those papers. I'm going to give it until the 14th because I just think the turnaround between today and Monday is just too quick for someone to prepare a discussion. So yeah.
Okay,
14th.
That's what I thought I heard you say. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, do make sure to get me the email as soon as you can about what articles you want to lead a discussion on so we can go ahead and make those assignments. Because again, when someone selects an article, it's then off the table and we'll then have to move on to another article choice.
Professor, how sooner will we know after we submit our email about our preferences? When will we get to know about it?
I will respond as soon as I see your email, and I'll go on the spreadsheet, make sure no one else has picked it. If no one's picked the article, I'll put your name on the spreadsheet and I'll respond immediately to you. So you get a response email right away.
Thank you.
Jocelyn, go ahead.
For the critiques, do you want them single spaced or double spaced?
Double space, please. And again, the length of the critique will depend upon the article you're selecting. So some articles are really in depth. There's one article by Alberta Spraggio, which is one of my favorite articles. It's a very in-depth article. It's got a lot of layers to it. It's something that's really easy to have a 30-minute discussion on, and there's a lot of meat in it for an article critique. There are some others like the break one that looks at the different types of grants. It's, I think, like a 3 or 4 page article, and it's really just kind of descriptive of saying, here's a project grant, this is how a project grant works. Here's a formula-based grant, this is how a formula-based grant works. But there's not a whole lot of meat and a whole lot of substance there. And so if you're writing a critique on that article, you may have to work a little bit harder to bring in some external information to kind of beef up that critique a little bit. One thing I do want to mention, though, as you are thinking about writing these article critiques and leading your discussion, the articles in the O'Toole textbook, some of them are older articles, and some of them are articles from the 1960s and the 1970s, because they're kind of seen as these classic articles in intergovernmental relations. So one good way to analyze an article is to update that article. So there's one article on medical marijuana. Well, when it was written, medical marijuana was kind of that cutting edge federalism issue. Now we have so many states that have not only authorized medical marijuana, but they've also authorized the recreational use of marijuana, that the issue is much richer today than it was back when we were just discussing medical marijuana. And so you'd want to update the author's argument, talk about some of the things that states have done, like here in California and Colorado and other states, in terms of recreational marijuana and what that means for the relationship between federal and state governments. For years, and still today, marijuana is still on the schedule of drugs for the federal government. So even though marijuana is something that's allowed for recreational use in several states, the federal government still sees that use as being illegal. So the question is then, the federal government has one set of laws, the state has a different set of laws, and will the federal government then decide to enforce its laws on states? In the Obama administration decided not to. The Obama administration did what we call nuanced federalism, where they decided when it comes to marijuana policy, we're going to forego enforcing federal laws. We're kind of going to let states do what they want to do. Then the Trump administration, when Jeff Sessions was Attorney General, one of the first things he did is he came out and said, we're going to enforce federal marijuana law. We don't care what the states say. We're going to come in and we're going to enforce federal law. Well, I mean, that's a huge question for federalism in terms of the sovereignty of states versus the oversight of the federal government. And so a lot of things have changed since that medical marijuana article was published. So you want to add those updates and kind of modernize the author's argument as part of your critical analysis. So let's keep that in mind as you're reading these articles. Some are dated, and so it's good that they are, because it gives us the challenge of going out there and then modernizing them and talk about how the issue has really changed over the past 10 or 20 years. So keep that in mind as you're writing these critiques and formulating your classroom discussion. Justin, go ahead.
Hi, and sorry if you already answered this, but so all of the readings that I see listed here, they can all be found in the O'Toole book. And if they're not in that textbook, they'll be under the additional readings.
Yes, if they're not in the O'Toole textbook, they'll be in the additional readings in the content section of our Beachboard site.
Okay, I just see different authors, so I wasn't sure if it was from O'Toole or not, but thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and I've put I think I put the link to the most recent review of American federalism from Publius, the one for, I guess it's 21-22. I've put that one up on our Beachboard site as well. So I think you've got it for, I think, 2 or 3 years there. So you can select any of those. Those are all possible articles you can use for your discussion, for your article critiques. But any of those that are on the website, the voting rights one, the tax cuts one, all of those are fair game for both the article critiques as well as your classroom discussion. And you will be able to, as I said, use the same article for your classroom discussion as you wrote a critique on, just to save yourself a little bit of time. Good questions. Any other questions about either the course or the program or any of the things we need to do to finish the program up? It'll be an earlier morning than I thought, but that's good. Give you some time to review the articles and the Constitution, because again, that's what we'll talk about on Monday night. And I'll give you a little bit of context for the Articles Confederation, where they came from. Then I'll give you some context for the Constitution and how but the delegates of the convention decided to get rid of the articles and replace them with a brand new Constitution. We'll talk about some of the impetus for that. And then, like I said, in the second half of class, we'll go through that Constitution. I would assume you probably talked about the Constitution in your 500 class. I know when I teach 500, we spend an entire week going through the Constitution. So hopefully you've gone through it in the relatively recent past. we will go through the different parts of the Constitution on Monday with an eye on federalism, what these different aspects of the Constitution mean for constitutional federalism as well as intergovernmental relations. And so that's what will be on our agenda then for Monday. So there are really no articles to lead a discussion on Monday. I'll lead all that discussion on Monday. And then the first articles I'll be available to lead a discussion on, the Federalist Papers, those will then be available for the discussion on the 14th. Okay. Okay, well, if there's nothing more, then I'll give you back the rest of your Saturday morning. We got in and got out in an hour, which is pretty efficient and economical. I'll go ahead and put this recording up on our Beachport site. As always, I'll be recording all of our Monday sessions and providing those links to you. If for some reason you can't attend on Monday, that's understandable. As you know, I don't take attendance. I don't assign any attendance points. And so if there's any Monday session you can't attend, the recording will be available to you no later than Tuesday, probably early afternoon. So you can always watch the recording. And then if you have any questions about the material, you can always then follow up with me with an email. But most of our Monday sessions will be very much based upon discussion of the article. And so participation really is helpful for you to get the full meaning of those articles and the full content out of the course. Okay, well, it's very good seeing everyone again. Again, if you have any questions about the course or the program, as always, feel free to send me an email. Otherwise, we'll be back at it on Monday at 6 o'clock and talk about the articles and the Constitution. Okay, thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. And I'll talk to you again on Monday. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.